This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Well, this is going to be a very interesting episode of Real Talk. Very much looking forward to it. As you know, the first episode every week for quite some time. We've been joined by RTDNA Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Emmy Award-winning talk radio legend, Charles Adler. And over the weekend, an announcement from the Prime Minister's office that took all of us, including, I suspect, most of you, off guard just the tiniest little bit. You may have been in this type of situation before in your own life, in your professional life, where a colleague of yours all of a sudden gets a new gig, gets a new promotion. But the magnitude of this one that we didn't see coming, obviously Chuck did. Obviously he's been keeping a little something to himself. The magnitude, pretty significant, as Charles Adler has been appointed to the Senate of Canada. More with Canada's newest senator in 30 seconds. But first, we'll let you know that this episode of Real Talk is happening thanks to the team at Rello. That's Alberta's top online real estate school at rello.ca, where better real estate training starts. You know, real estate learning online with Rello is for the bold and ambitious. And no matter where you are in your career, they're there to help you find the next level. They're the only real estate school that sets you up with a professional practice network, professional development webinars, and a whole lot more. Say hello to being your own boss by getting started at Rello. And don't forget the promo codes Ryan100. That's all one word, Ryan100. Will knock $100 off both their Alberta residential and their Alberta commercial real estate bundles at rello.ca. Charles Adler presented weekly right here on Real Talk by our friends at Tice Automotive Consulting. And this is the very first time that I have ever introduced Senator Charles Adler. Welcome to the show, my man. What a weekend for you.
Thanks very much. And I just want to let everyone know that off the air, we had a very brief chat about this. And you simply said that I was going to get some tough questions. And I said, you know that softball bores my tail off, so let's play hardball.
Okay, but and people also probably know that we like to run and gun, and we never have too much of a plan. We have structure, but not a plan when we're talking. But I'll pull back the curtain right now to let you know I was at least going to congratulate you and participate in some small talk before I started throwing fastballs high and inside. But you look like you want him right away. You want him on the first pitch.
I'm just ready to fly because I look forward to every Monday with you, and I really look forward to it when I know that you're gonna challenge me.
Okay,
I don't spend much time wanting to talk to people who are sycophants because beyond everything else, it's just boring. And the number one thing that a show called Real Talk cannot do is bore people with, just give me 20 seconds on this. Phil Donahue has just died. I realize some people who are a little bit younger don't know who he is, but he was a pioneer of talk television, of controversial talk television, huge. And the things that he had going for him most, number one, he had great ears. Yes, he was a great talker, but to be a really great talker, you got to be a great listener. Phil Donahue had great ears. He had a great set of ears. Number two, he had empathy. He knew how to walk miles in other people's boots. And the most important thing he had was he knew when to change pace just before the audience got bored. Boredom kills. I've said that on the radio 1,000 times, and there's nothing more boring than people just sucking up to each other and doing all that phony baloney stuff, which works in small talk. If you're with someone on a bus, train, plane, whatever, it doesn't work in a podcast.
Well, nobody thinks that you're going to bore your fellow senators, and nobody thinks that you will be a boring or life-sucking addition to the Red Chamber. But a lot of people are pointing out. And number one, let me just say, congratulations. This is a huge deal. and it's something that you've called the honor of your life. And I know that we'll get into that. I want to talk about your impression going in, maybe what some of your top priorities will be. I mean, each senator typically comes into this from a different background. That's part of the beauty of the Canadian Senate, but it is appointed. It's not elected. And you have been very critical of Canada's Senate and the process in past. And I'm not the only one that knows it, Chuck. I mean, Twitter was booming over the weekend by people bringing your own words and putting them back in front of you in 2013 when you were hosting a different talk show. Of course, you presented Canadian Common Sense. It's been kind of your calling card for many, many years. You say, I shared in the dream for a triple E Senate. That dream is dust. That was in 2013. Also in 2013, you tweeted that the Conservative Party of Canada should propose Senate abolition in their first term of a new government. You said, let the post-Senate era begin. And how about this one? 2013, you were on a roll there. You said, living with the Canadian Senate is living a lie. It's not a chamber of sober second thought. It is a chamber of drunken second chances. That was all in 2013. So what happened over the last 11 years?
Well, as you know, I tell the truth and I'm not boring. And I've got 5 years here because there's mandatory retirement at 75. And if you ask me, what I seek to accomplish, there are many things that I'd like to do that comport with my values, which I believe are the values of 90% of Canadians. I'm talking about the rule of law. I'm talking about egalitarianism. I'm talking about rights, human rights, property rights, free enterprise, a whole bunch of stuff that 90% of Canadians and I agree on. So here's the deal. I said what I said and meant what I said, and if there's anything that I could leave as a legacy for this country that I love so much for the next 100 and 200 years, it would be to approve of a bill to turn the Senate into what Preston Manning would call a triple E Senate. Equal, every province, same votes, effective, and what's the other one, Ryan? Just want to see if you're still with me here. Equal, effective. What's the other one, Ryan?
Yeah. Well, equal, elected, and effective is
elected. That's the most important
triple E
one.
that Preston talked about.
That's what would make the Senate truly, truly democratic. And I'm hoping that in the next 5 years, I get an opportunity to affirm, using my, second sober thought business. All those things are cliches. I want to be thoughtful about this. I've been thoughtful about this for many years. No reason not to be thoughtful now. I'd love for the Senate to be truly democratic, and for what happened with me and for me to go into the dark ages. I want people to be able to elect their senators directly, just as they do in our neighboring country, the United States. And if I can participate in making sure that happens, I think that would be a tremendous legacy. You can agree with, disagree with that.
Well, I'm curious to see how that's going to land. I mean, you haven't even stepped foot on that carpet even once yet, and
Right.
and you're already calling for the entire process, the entire structure of it to be shaken at its core. And I wonder how your colleagues, all of them appointed, will feel about your call for an elected Senate. Prime Minister Harper tried to make it happen for quite some time. Ultimately, essentially gave up on it. My words, not his.
No, he did, and someday it'll require a constitutional conference and provincial premiers and the Prime Minister and all of that. But at some point, I think it needs to happen. So I've been saying that for decades now, and I don't see why I should change my mind now. The Prime Minister, in his conversation with me 10, 11 days ago, I lost the math. It was it'll be 2 weeks. This coming Thursday, because it was a Thursday afternoon. So it was about 10 days ago. Anyway, his only directive to me, if I can call it a directive, is certainly not a commandment. I know people want to call him a dictator. He's not a dictator. That's, ridiculous talk, not real talk. Anyway, his request, I guess a better way of putting it, his only request of me was that I stay true to my values. I mean, he said specifically, I'm not putting you there to vote for my policies, with them, against them, whatever. Your values, that's what I want. That's what I want Canadians to experience. That's certainly what I want the Senate to experience. So I just want you to be as independent as possible, because he believes in an independent Senate. I know that people want to criticize him for that, but I mean, I've been a lifelong small C conservative, and I'm being appointed by a Liberal Prime Minister, if that doesn't look like independence or smell like independence, and I don't know what does.
Yeah, there's a lot of people going, though, yeah, Adler kind of changed his tune on Justin Trudeau, changed his tune on the Liberals over the past number of years, and now people are going, aha, now it all makes sense. A plus B equals C. Did you start thinking about this years ago? And if so, did you forecast that there was going to be a Liberal Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau in particular? And if so, did you figure that there was no way in hell you were getting into the Senate unless you went a little easier on him? Was this all part of a bigger plan?
So you don't think I'm a spontaneous guy? I've got this kind of strategy. I go into some cave in Switzerland with the WEF and plot this stuff out. That's kind of
well. How long ago did you start thinking about being a senator? This is something that people aspire to, right?
Look, I never thought I would be a senator. I mean, I joked about that for years on the air when people asked me about it, and I talked about it, and I said I can't imagine, I can't imagine being able to stay awake for it. I just thought it was the kind of thing that would just bore me, and just as I've told a million people a million ways that boredom kills. I wasn't looking for boredom. So no, I didn't have any dreams or aspirations to be a senator. I was approached a few months ago by real people in real Manitoba, and I was honored that they were talking to me about this. And then you've got this independent advisory board. I don't want to get too much into the policy weeds, because once again that's kind of boring. But you've got an independent advisory board in Manitoba and every other province, Alberta and every other province. And so real people make recommendations to the Prime Minister, whoever the Prime Minister is. I mean, this started under Trudeau, but if Poilievre wins in a year or so, a year and a half from now, it'll be the same thing unless he wants to change it. The point is, real people in this province that I live in, Manitoba, make recommendations, and then the Prime Minister acts on those recommendations, and they recommended me. And the Prime Minister, I have no idea what's going on in his mind. Obviously he's a politician. Maybe he thought, that it was the smartest political thing to do, because I'm not known as a liberal. I know that I'm known as a liberal by anti-vaxxers and zealots and whatever, because I'm not for what they're doing, and if I'm not for anti-vaxxing, and if I'm not for threatening the RCMP at Coots, well, I must be a liberal. But I mean, I'm just talking to rational people right now, like you and 99% of your audience. I can't be inside the Prime Minister's head. I can only be inside my own head. And based on how this process worked out, I'd rather it be a democratic election. We can't have that, but we still have grassroots people, real people making a recommendation. That's as close to democracy as it gets. If I could change it with a magic wand, I would. But it's the best. It's the best we have right now, and I have an opportunity to make a difference on some issues, including the one we're talking about, making the Senate truly democratic.
There is no doubt you have an opportunity. You have a huge opportunity. It's interesting, though, to hear you reiterate how you felt about the Senate all along. I mean, number one, calling openly for a conservative government at that time to abolish the Senate, but also, disclosing to us that you never felt like you could be a part of it because you thought it would essentially put you to sleep. What changed? I mean, I can't see any dramatic evolution of the Senate over the past 10 years since you were talking to much of a different tone. What makes you believe that you could be effective here now? You sure sound hungry. You sound motivated, but you thought this was going to put you to sleep just a short time ago.
Yeah, I did. And I've got, I've got something, going through my mind, just behind me, you see a picture of my father. And I've been, discussing this with the memory of my father. I'm not trying to make this weird or anything, but, ever since he passed, I don't go through a single hour of a single day without asking, what would Mike Adler think of this? And what would Mike Adler think of that? And when I was approached about the Senate, I consulted with Mike Adler. He would be honored to have his name in that chamber. He'd be honored to have that name being approved of by the Crown, by the Governor General, who represents the country. That's the country that he brought me to. He called this country the Promised Land. And I cannot imagine my father having a conversation with me where I say, well, I think I might get bored. I don't think that would pass muster. I'm not saying that he would administer any kind of physical punishment, but there would be moral punishment, because he would say that everything this country has given the Adler family, and you think you have the right to be bored, you have an obligation to serve. That's what he would say. And you need to be honored, because this is a privilege that is extended to very few people. And if you can make a difference on a couple of issues that matter to the Adler family and to families right across Canada, issues related to democracy, issues related to human rights, issues related to egalitarianism, issues related to the rule of law, which was of primary importance to my father. I think I've shared with you before that my father's dream was for me to be a lawyer and to be a prosecutor in The Hague, in the Netherlands, at the International Tribunal, so that at the ICC, I would prosecute war criminals, like the people who put my grandparents in a gas chamber. And I'm not talking about just the so-called, business about war criminals who commit crimes against Jews, whether it's Vladimir Putin committing crime against Ukrainians, whether it's people committing crimes against people in Cambodia or anywhere in the world. That was my father's dream. He thought I had the jelly. He thought I had the brains. He thought I had the motivation. And when I got into radio, the most disappointed person in the world was my father, because he felt that was underachieving and that I should go further. And we had many years where conversations were rather difficult. My father, I found out, was okay with the radio thing, if I can call it that, the radio career, because his caregiver, when he was in the throes of Alzheimer's, saw my father point to a radio, and I happened to be on the radio at the time, and he was pointing at the radio, and he wasn't very verbal then at all, but he would manage to say two words, my son. And the caregiver gave me that information, and it made things, I guess, a little bit better for me. But that's the long answer to a short question. Mike Adler, my father, would not tolerate the idea of me saying to a prime minister, I'm sorry. That might be a little boring.
We're talking to Charles Adler here in the Real Talk YouTube live chat. Leslie says, I don't always agree with Charles, and I'm not conservative, but I'm really pleased to see a level-headed conservative in Senate. Vamp Fashions jumps up and says, hardly a level-headed conservative. The label used to be Red Tory. And then Tony says, wait, what? Charles isn't a liberal? So Twitter's lying? Everybody's trying to figure you out, Chuck. I will say this, though. When we ask you, when I start saying, what are your priorities? What are some of the things you'll focus on? And we can dig deeper into this. Like I wrote it down. Two of the first three things you said had to do with justice, like crime and punishment, and property rights. That's not what a lefty says in the first sentence. I'm
not a lefty. I mean, I get, one of the reasons I get tired of saying that is because I know when people say that, he's being defensive. I mean, there's a left of center liberal right in the Manitoba caucus, Dan Vandal, who just put something out. The media, I'm sure, will jump all over it. And, he's saying there are people much more capable than Charles Adler of being in the Senate. So there's opposition from the Liberals, from one of Trudeau's cabinet ministers. I mean, that's the Liberals. Liberals who know me don't think of me as a liberal. I'm a small C conservative. I mean, to say it for the billionth time, I'm a social moderate, okay, and I'm a fiscal conservative. And if I had my druthers, our debt would be much lower, the price of our dollar would be higher, we'd have better policies in a number of areas that involve Canada's exports and in capital investment in Canada. I've always been pro-energy. I mean, you can check off all of the boxes. Nobody who is what I would call a flaming left liberal would identify me as one of them. I think the only reason we've got these issues and this business of he's a liberal, is because I had a row with Jason Kenney, and I'm not going to go over that. Everyone watching and listening to Real Talk knows what that's about, and that became a big rupture. That's when the Conservatives decided to boycott my show and boycott my life and get all over Facebook and make up all sorts of nonsense about how I disparaged Albertans. I didn't respect Albertans because I called a small group of people who were hate mongers. I called them knuckle draggers, and then Jason Kenney's people turned that into Charles Adler thinks all Albertans are knuckle draggers. No, whatever.
Let me just jump in and say congratulations to Charles Adler. Senator Adler, I can't wait to text you every Monday and say, good morning, Senator. Yeah. Also, like to congratulate you, Ryan. I mean, the second weekly guest on this show that has now ascended the ranks to Ottawa. You are now the kingmaker.
Oh, yeah. There you go. You and Supriya Dwivedi have both had pretty good years, Charles. And so I guess Johnny's probably just waiting for when he's going to get tapped on
when
the
am I
shoulder
going to get appointed somewhere?
Well, Johnny, I want to tell you, because Johnny has become, as you know, my favorite human being. I love you, Ryan. I love you to bits, but I just love watching the evolution of Johnny Infamous. And Johnny,
thank you,
just
sir.
want to tell
Thank
you
you.
right now, even though this will really piss off Ryan, there is an Alberta opening for the Senate, Johnny.
Oh, no. I don't think I qualify.
I think that our pal, co-host of the Discourse, Erica Baroudis, is hoping that that's going to be her. If you want an elected Senate, Chuck, she ran and she won in Alberta. And
you don't want to dig into my past either.
So she's Erica's sitting there waiting for her appointment. She might.
Is Johnny a Canadian? Because I know he's born in the States. So
you're dual.
I'm a dually.
I don't want to turn this into the McCarthy. Are you a card-carrying communist?
I'm not sure. Do you have to be Canadian born to be in the Senate, or just a citizen?
No, I'm not Canadian born. I was born in Hungary, and as a matter of fact, the Hungarians want me on one of their networks tomorrow. So I'll be doing an interview, and I said to her, I know that I'm not known as humble by some people, but I humbly submit that my Hungarian is what Hungarians would call peasant Hungarian. Okay, I don't speak I try to speak the Queen's English, but I don't speak the Emperor's Hungarian. So she said, that's okay. You can speak in English as much as you want to. We'll translate, and every now and then, if you want to break into Hungarian, you can do that. But no, I wasn't born here.
Okay, listen, I want to get into. I hadn't even heard of these comments from Dan Vandal, Manitoba's only representative in federal cabinet, but I want to get to that in just a little bit because it's kind of interesting. Plus, I want to talk more details, get to more comments in our live chat. We're talking to Senator Charles Adler. That's still going to take a bit of getting used to. Appointed over the weekend, along with Tracy Mugley, and we'll talk about that as well as our pal Chuck gets ready to head to Ottawa. His appearances on Real Talk are proudly presented by Tice Automotive Consulting, and the team at Tice believes that buying a vehicle should be fun, and they can make that happen. If you're one of these folks that sort of bristles at the thought of walking into a car dealership, or maybe even worse, heading out into Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji because you need a new or gently used vehicle, but you don't really know what you're looking for. You don't want to buy a lemon. You don't want to get ripped off. And quite frankly, you feel like you might be getting taken advantage of. The team at Tice understands this, and that's the whole premise of their business model. They're going to work with you to understand what you're looking for, understand your budget, then they're going to go out and find the perfect ride. Their team of experienced professional mechanics are going to give that car the 100-point inspection. They'll deliver it to you with the white glove service, and that's just where the relationship begins. If you like, you can even subscribe to a monthly maintenance plan. They'll pick your car up when it needs the tires rotated. They'll pick your car up when it needs its oil changed. You can learn more about it at ticeautomotive.com. They have clearly stated fees for how the business relationship works, and as you can see, for vehicles under 10 grand, under 20 grand, over 20 grand, flat fees, so you always know what you're going to pay. Plus, they have fleet services too. Business owners, take note. That's ticeautomotive.com. Our friends at Friesen Brothers are got you covered through barbecue season. You can check out their website at friesen.com for giveaways, grilling tips, and more. Plus, For families that are looking to keep a little money in the pocket, to stretch those dollars as much as you can, we personally recommend the Family Essentials Flyer. Our family uses this flyer to learn more about quality food for low prices every single day. They know families are busy, and they know that the best times happen around the family dinner table, so they've got you covered at Friesen Brothers. Friesen Brothers is Alberta grown and Alberta owned. And we are getting back to that time of year. How many of you have already done the back to school run? Hey, get your kids all covered with school supplies. When fall hits, people start thinking about getting back into class. If you're thinking of yourself right now and that post-secondary journey that you've always wanted to pursue, but you felt that there have been challenges, there's been barriers, there's been hurdles in the way, have you considered Athabasca University? They've got world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education when and where it works for you. Your only commute is to your device. And they've got financial aid and awards available. For those of you that qualify, you can learn more about the AU Advantage by visiting them online at athabascau.ca. We are privy to an email here from Scott K. And this email is directed to Senator Charles Adler. And typically, the language that you're about to hear in this email, you would hear it reserved, typically, Charles, for Fridays when Real Talk presents the Flamethrower, courtesy of our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton.
I love the flamethrowers.
Yeah, I know you enjoy. You actually feature into quite a few flamethrowers week to week,
right?
depending on your hot takes. But I want to read you this one from Scott K. And earmuffs, kids. For any kids that are listening, we're not going to edit this email at all. And Chuck, I want you to respond. Scott, upon hearing that you've been appointed to the Senate of Canada, says, so a career of watching politicians live the high life and look down on Canadians. Now, Charles, the man of the people, is joining the elitist scumbags of Canadian politics, going the unaccountable, corrupt route to royalty on the taxpayer's back. Independent, centrist, give me a fucking break. Just another scumbag prick liar at the taxpayer's trough. I'm done with you, you lying fucktard. That's from Scott K. And I thought you might want a chance to respond in Real Talk.
Here's the response. Scott, thank you very much for the bouquets. They just smell wonderful. And what I want to know is right now, Ryan, I'm going to say something, and then you can tell me after I say it whether it's based on how you know me, whether it's BS or real, as in real talk, as in a real thought. My real thought is, Scott, I will represent you to the best of my ability, just like I will represent everyone else. I don't represent people based on whether or not they agree with anything I say, or even whether they think I'm of high character. I will be happy to represent you because you're a Canadian, and no matter how much you want to despise me, I love you.
Wow. Pure class. You're going to have to, this is like a whole new thing, you know. You remember, like, when Danielle Smith, our former radio colleague, was elected leader of the United Conservatives and became the premier of Alberta, one of the very first things that people honed in on was her habit of blocking her critics on Twitter. Yeah. And there were demands that she unblock people en masse. We talked to her about it, put her on the spot right here on Real Talk, and actually she wound up doing it. And now I see that her team is reblocking some people and whatever. That's fine. That's her prerogative. That's not my problem.
Right. Yeah.
You have a ton of people blocked. So do I. Both of us have worked in talk radio. That email from Scott K. is just one sample of a smorgasbord that folks like Chuck Adler have been looking at for many, many years. As a senator, do you have to behave a little bit differently? Are you going to be unblocking your critics on Twitter? Will you be more accessible, more accountable? The AA Senate with Charles Adler?
Look, the thing is that what I'm always most concerned about on Twitter is the people who follow me for all of the right reasons, okay? I'm not interested in half the people on Twitter who aren't even people. They're bots. I'm not interested in another huge percentage that are just trolling, okay? I'm interested in people who are genuinely interested in the things that we're talking about. And unfortunately, that means blocking, because when you don't block and you allow the sewage in, the sewage washes over the boots of those people who are genuine. So anything I talk about on radio, in the Senate, on the podcast, anything I talk about on Twitter, it's always defending people. So when I'm attacking someone, it's because I'm defending the people that they're attacking. So if I'm blocking someone, it's because I'm defending my genuine followers from having sewage on their boots.
All right, I want to reference reporting on Politico here. You put it on my radar. I hadn't even heard what Minister Dan Vandal had said about you out of Manitoba, but reports Politico, Senator Talk Radio. Imagine telling Charles Adler, they write, as he first walked off the set of his Sun News Network show in 2011, that he would one day sit in the Senate and that Justin Trudeau, then a rookie opposition MP, would be the man to put him there. Head exploding emoji. But the Ottawa Fishbowl woke up Saturday to a press release. Trudeau had nominated Adler for a Manitoba seat and Tracy Mugley, a healthcare executive, two-time Liberal candidate, for a spot next door in Saskatchewan. Playbook, this is Politico, reached out to Northern Affairs Minister Dan Vandal, Manitoba's only representative in cabinet, in case he had a view. And he did, in fact, quote, "There are many eminently qualified Manitobans who are better suited to represent our province than Charles Adler." Okay, then, says the reporter for Politico. What is something like that? Well, that's not exactly a warm welcome. It's not exactly a ringing endorsement. Is this water off a duck's back, or does that piss you off a little bit?
No, it doesn't piss me off at all, Dan. Dan's got a chip on his shoulder because I didn't support Dan when he was running for mayor in Winnipeg, I don't know, 20 years ago, whatever it was, a long time ago. And I supported his opponent. And Dan's wasn't happy about that. And Dan blames me for not becoming the next mayor, just like, Glenn Murray was the mayor of Winnipeg, and we had some tussles, and he ended up having to leave office, and he blames me for that. In Manitoba, a lot of people have blamed me for making or breaking certain people. Dan Vandal clearly felt broken and still does, which I find humorous. Sorry, Dan, I find it funny. You're a federal cabinet minister, for crying out loud. I don't think I hurt you too badly.
You go in as a broadcaster. There's been obviously those that have gone before you, Mike Duffy, Pamela Wallin. Do you think does a broadcaster? I mean, obviously both of those senators have pretty different track records. I would hope that your track record will be different than both of theirs, and that you will obviously blaze your own trail. But does a broadcaster bring a little something different to the mix? I mean, like you've just alluded to, I'd be in the same boat. You're me times 10, though. I mean, you've planted a lot of landmines over the years. You've thrown a lot of hand grenades. You've thrown a lot of punches. Like you come in a little bit different than your colleague, Ms. Mugley, who will go in there. Like as a healthcare executive, like it's just different than somebody who's been like calling it how it is publicly to build audience for 30, 40 years.
Well, I guess with apologies to conservatives who want to see me, some conservatives who want to see me as once again, a flaming liberal, a socialist, a communist, a pinko, whatever. I'm a capitalist, okay? So I make no apologies for the fact that in the media business, yes, it's a business, my number one responsibility was generating ratings and revenue. And the reason I got the good offers and a lot of other very nice things that happened to my life was because I was able to generate ratings, because I wasn't boring, and I generated a lot of money for the radio and TV stations that I worked with. And so that's my answer. I'm not going to apologize for having been successful.
Are you, like, when you take a look at how the Senate's functioning right now, and there have been some instances over the past couple of years where they've sent bills back. And we talked to Senator Paula Simons about a couple of examples. If people want to listen to that, that was within the last month in our podcast and YouTube archives. When you take a look at how it's functioning right now, it's a Senate that's comprised largely of Trudeau appointees. I think almost 90 now. I think you and Ms. Mugley are like 88 and 89 or something like that. So there's a lot of you in there. What's your assessment of how do you see it as dysfunctional right now? Do you see it on the road to improvement? Like, what's your assessment?
I I'm a rookie. I haven't even, been sworn in. I haven't spent 1 minute in the Red Chamber, even as a visitor. I don't recall ever visiting the Red Chamber. So for me to comment effectively and thoughtfully on whether or not the Senate is too plugged up, whether or not it needs a plumbing job or a demolition job or any kind of, I can't right now. I've got to actually be there. I'll be happy to answer that question once I've been there for, a few months. But Paula Simons is the most articulate, eloquent person, like in Canada, and the Senate is lucky to have her. Canadians are lucky to have her. Your listeners and followers are lucky to have her when she's on this show. And I just have to defer to the expert, Paula Simons. If she says what she's saying, I absolutely guarantee you, knowing Paula's head and her heart, that it's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yeah, she's. I think Paula's been an example, and I want to give people the exact date on when that was that Paula Simons joined us. It was July 19th of a 2024. Senator Paula Simons joined us in studio, and we had a wonderful conversation. Actually, that was another example, kind of what I was saying about you, Chuck. Like, you and I know typically what we're going to talk about over the course of a show, but we leave some wiggle room to bounce around, and that was what happened. When we sat down with the senator out of Alberta, obviously formerly a national newspaper award-winning columnist, held in high regard for her journalism career, we talked about a ton that we didn't plan, including medical assistance in dying, including MAID. Her own family had an experience that was relevant to that discussion, and I respected her candor there. But, I think that's what people look to the Senate for. Like, it's you can make an argument for and against Senate appointments. Like, I always think in a democracy, it is kind of weird to have a body that reviews and ultimately rubber stamps or sends back legislation that an elected house has put to it. Like, I do think that's a little weird, but I also do think that you can make an argument that there is a check and balance there, and that the Senate is intended to represent Canadians, and that that's why appointments are such a big deal, because a prime minister, regardless of the party that they're leading, is putting in place people that play a very important role, And so, I know that Canadians will have different opinions on how the Senate should be constructed, so to speak, and how it should come together. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, the job that you're doing is incredibly important. You called it the honor of your life over the weekend. That's kind of saying a lot. Not to pump your tires, but we're pals, and I'm proud of you. And there's a reason why we bring you on every single week. Like, you've had a hell of a career, man. You've won an Emmy. Like, you've done all this, this remarkable stuff. You've hosted national talk shows, and yet being appointed to the Senate, you're saying, is the honor of your life. I think that says something.
The reason it's the honor of my life is because it's Canada. I'm a capitalist. I said a few moments ago. And I've done half a century of that, and it's time for me to accept the fact that I'm no longer, I've said on your show many times, I'm middle-aged. And you said, Chuck, you're not middle-aged. You're not. So it's time for me to accept reality. So in this, heading into the winter of my life, it's time for me to understand that there is such a thing as compromise, and perfection cannot be the enemy of the good. So the Senate isn't perfect, obviously, but if I can make a contribution there, that's what we have right now. That's where I will go in the winter of my life, trying to be as helpful as possible. I'm positive if Paula Simons was on with us, she'd be on exactly the same page. Just because we don't think that the institution is perfect doesn't mean that we can't do some good. And that is, to me, simply what most Canadians would call reasonable and a compromise. It's easy to be dogmatic about things, but it doesn't achieve anything. It's easy to be ideological. It doesn't achieve anything. When I'm in the Senate, I'm absolutely confident that some of my best friends will be part of the Conservative caucus, and some others will be part of the Progressive caucus, and there's the Independent caucus, and I have no idea which caucus I want to sit in. I'll find out after I spend a little bit of time there. But when we talk about honor, when the Governor General, the highest representative of Canada, when she appoints you as much as some people don't like to hear this, you salute. I can't tell you how honored I am to have the greatest country in the world, the Adler family's promised land, offer me an opportunity to weigh in on the most important issues that the nation faces. And once again, I get that it's not Triple E. I've been the greatest supporter of Triple E, but it is what it is. I mean, would you respect me if I said to the Prime Minister, I'm sorry, when the Senate becomes Triple E, call me back?
I mean, I wouldn't call it the smartest career move, if you want my honest answer. I think it's an incredible opportunity. I don't blame you for taking it. I'm remarkably proud of you. I think that you're going to do amazing work there. And I think that people have a point. People that are critical of you for this, just because, I'm trying to think of something, what would be the equivalent for me? The equivalent for me would be going to work for Jason Kenney. If I went to work for Jason Kenney, that would be the equivalent of you being appointed to the Senate. I'm trying to think of what I've been perhaps most outspoken on.
If I think you'd be right. Let me just take that point. If this job was about working for Justin Trudeau, which is the equivalent of what you're talking about, going to work for Jason Kenney, then you'd be right. But I'm not working for Justin Trudeau. Well, what happens when I talk about economic conservatism, fiscal responsibility? What happens when I talk about wanting a higher dollar? What happens when I talk about not squeezing our export industries to the point where we can't possibly have a higher dollar? I went to the Royal Bank the other day because, as you know, I was going to Vegas for a few days because that's where I tend to celebrate my birthday, which is coming up. So I went to Vegas and didn't know whether I'd run into any trouble at the airport. So just in case, I wanted to have a little bit of cash in my pocket. So I went to the Royal Bank to get $100 US. And she said, sir, that'll be $143. I said, what? So it's now 143 Canadian for $100? Well, without getting into a long, detailed discussion about this, if our country, which is a very wealthy country and a very well-educated country, and God knows we've got resources, I don't have to, explain that to anybody in Alberta, there is no excuse for us to have a 73-cent dollar. There's no excuse for it to cost 143 Canadian dollars to get $100 greenbacks. And I don't want to get into all the nostalgia about how I grew up with our dollar at par and Canadian dollar was even higher. I don't want to bore the audience with all that. The point is, we need to be more fiscally responsible. So if someone wants to tag me as working for Trudeau when I'm saying that, they're not listening.
I'm with you on everything, except I don't believe for a second that you went to the bank to take out $100 before you went to Las Vegas for your birthday. I'm going to call bullshit on that, Adler.
Charles, I also want to say you got to be fiscally responsible now. Do not spend it on anything stupid in Vegas on your birthday now, because all your financials are going to be
yeah,
public.
that's right.
So
Well, yeah,
just be careful what you do in Vegas from now on.
Your cash expenditures will be kept private, but now there's going to be a whole new level of scrutiny. In all seriousness, Johnny
Ryan,
makes a great point.
Ryan, it's not like I didn't take my visa as well. I just wanted to have some cash swimming around in my pockets. Just in case I needed something for something.
Cash purchases are always questionable.
Cash is king, buddy. Cash is king. But Johnny's right. Johnny's right. There's going to be a whole new level of scrutiny on you. And you know as well as I do that you're going to have a big target on your back. And there's going to be people that can't wait to go through your expenses and to talk to your staffers. And they're going to want to know every little bit.
I get it. Yeah, I get it. I mean, I used to joke about this on the radio that, one reason I wouldn't want to be a public servant, on the taxpayers' nickel and nipple and all those wonderful things is because, I don't want to have a proctology exam every day. So I imagine one of the sacrifices, there it is, a sacrifice. He's joining this, all the stuff that Scott, the letter writer, talked about, the royalty and privilege and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Might as well be called the House of Lords, from his point of view, I get all that. I've joked about all of that over the years. So the thing is that I do understand that I'll be under a lot of scrutiny and suspicion. I understand there's a target on my back. There's some liberals who obviously can't stand me. There's some conservatives who can't stand me, and they will look for every single opportunity to prove that I'm not pure. I can save them some time right now. I am a sinner, okay? I believe in original sin. I am not pure. I'm not an elephant. I'm a human being.
I want to get to some more, and I appreciate you sitting and taking these, because people want to. You and I do something very unique, and Real Talk does something very unique, and we get on and we talk about the news of the day every single week for about an hour, and we say what we actually think about it, and we open it up so people can make their own comments. And so to have this opportunity, and I want to commend you for this, by the way, just to spell it out, like you could right now go shields up. Right? You could right now listen to a team of advisors and say, we're not going to say anything foolish. We're not going to say anything provocative. We're not going to say anything controversial. There's no need. Quite frankly, it makes sense to say less now than more. But here you are on a regular weekly appointment presented by Tice Automotive Consulting, taking these questions. And so I want to put some of the criticism in front of you because I want to give you a chance to address it. Stephen is in our chat, and he says, if this was like 10 years ago and Charles was still in that media landscape, I guess he's talking about Sun News Network, he says he'd almost certainly be a loud and proud Polyev surrogate. Just look how he went from being anti-Senate to this. I don't think that Charles Adler has principles. What would you say to Stephen?
I would say to Stephen that I do have principles, and I'm proud of my principles, and I'm at a different stage of my life right now than when I was on that landscape. And at this stage of my life, I think I can make a contribution to the country I love, and I'm not going to apologize for that. And if the principle of patriotism and serving your country is a principle that you don't respect, once again, I'll respect your decision to dissent, and I will be happy to represent you and your interests as well. But if you're just asking me the question, is this a principled decision? Every decision I make to offer any argument about anything starts with first principles. There has to be once again, I don't want to bore people with, how to debate and how to argue and all that, but you've got to have a central organizing principle, and then you surround that principle and embroider that principle with various facts. And yes, sometimes facts are also married to opinions, and opinions that are not married to facts have a really bad marriage.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I'd rather have you address these than me address them. I don't speak for you. I never have. But I would also point out that you have experienced sort of a Saul to Paul type thing. You have had your sort of political evolution very publicly over the past 10 years or so, and people have obviously noticed, and we've talked about it many, 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 many times on the show. So if people are looking for, that you and I today didn't talk a whole lot about your political evolution, there are hours of interviews that they can go back, and you and I have talked about this a lot. But I will say that you did evolve, and you were very public about your feelings on things and your thinking and the rationale behind some of the positions you were taking that were surprising some people from the pulpit, while hosting national talk shows. And you could probably make the argument that your most recent national talk show, before you started hanging out with us here, and I don't know what phrase you prefer to use, when you're fired, let go, when there was a mutual, whatever it was, your business relationship with Chorus, when that came to an end, by that point, you were, utilizing the audience. I mean, you were talking to probably, the biggest talk audience in the country, very openly about your thoughts and how they had changed. And I saw it because I was part of that. I was part of that corporation for many times with you. We worked together. You and I traveled to Toronto. You and I have been, working together a long time, and I've seen all this publicly and behind the scenes. So just to speak to Stephen's comment, to say that you'd be carrying water for Pierre Poilievre, just because, I don't buy it, because you weren't carrying water for conservative leaders before him. And it's recently, you evolved in the public eye. And I think that there's something to be said for that. That's different than the average person that changes their mind quietly or that talks to their peer circle. You were doing it in front of an entire nation.
I voted for Stephen Harper twice, and Stephen Harper never wanted to come on my show. Stephen Harper agreed to come on my show one time, when we were doing the radiothon for Haiti, and he agreed to come on only after I spoke into John Williamson's voice message on his iPhone. John Williamson is an MP right now in New Brunswick, but at the time he was communications director for Harper, and he made me say into the machine that I promise Prime Minister Harper to only ask about Haiti and participate in our radiothon and tell us what you think of what's going on in Haiti and what your family thinks, and not discuss any other issues. So there it is. You can talk about the Sun Radio Network. You can try to pretend that I was some sort of lapdog for Stephen Harper. Stephen Harper didn't want to do my show because Stephen Harper felt I wasn't predictable enough for him, felt I wasn't a so-called friendly. I don't have to tell people living in Alberta that there were certain friendlies working in this province who had Stephen Harper on regularly because Stephen Harper got a predictable, friendly host and he had absolutely nothing to fear. But to say that I would be in the tank with Poilievre when I clearly wasn't in the tank with Stephen Harper makes no sense. And for anyone to say that I'm in the tank right now with the current Prime Minister, if you listen back to everything that's been said for the last 45 minutes, how many of those things would Justin Trudeau agree with?
Yeah, I'd be curious to see. And the number one point that needs to be made around that is that's not your concern. That's not your job to worry about what the Prime Minister would or would not be concerned about. I like this from Erica in the live chat, says I'd actually be concerned. She says, if somebody thinks the exact same way they did about everything 10 years ago, I can't imagine not growing or evolving. That from Erica.
Erica, I just want to say that a quote that you might want to use from time to time, and there's all sorts of controversy about who actually said this. Sometimes it's attributed to John Maynard Keynes, but it doesn't matter. The quote is wonderful. When the facts change, so does my opinion. What do you do?
I like that. Jeremy Farkas says, I really appreciate Jespo's points here. Most people learn and suffer setbacks in private. It's a completely different thing for those of us in the public eye. People should be allowed to learn and grow. I know you know the context of that comment, but let me spell it out for people that aren't familiar. Jeremy Farkas, a very high-profile city councillor down in Calgary, sought the mayor's chair, didn't win that election, but then Jeremy has really, and I certainly don't speak for him either, but he's been on the show. People can check out our interviews with him, but Jeremy kind of evolved his political or his public persona a little bit. And I don't know if he'll appreciate me saying this, but I know a lot of people saw Jeremy Farkas for a long time as just kind of this like, you know, this sort of like conservative kind of attack dog type city councilor, like fiscal hawk, outspoken, maybe a tiny bit snarky, like a little bit sarcastic, that kind of a thing, like a bit of a sharp knife in the drawer, if you know what I mean. Like, and then after losing that election, he went and he's talked to us on the show. You should watch that interview. But Chuck, he went on a series of like very ambitious hikes and raised a ton of dough. Like, I don't remember exactly how much, but I think like hundreds of thousands of dollars for charity. And he's come out and spoken openly about his personal experiences and his support for the LGBTQ plus 2+ community, 2S+, and like he's just Jeremy has like really been a fascinating fella to watch over the past couple of years as well. So I just want to make that point. That's not just your average person in the live chat talking about evolving or growing as a person, publicly, because he's experienced it himself as well.
Well, people who want to criticize conservatives, in a dogmatic way, always say, they have no heart. They've got no compassion. Well, sorry. Let me introduce you to Jeremy Farkas. And if you think that he doesn't have a heart that's bigger than Canada's, if you don't think that he's charitable, if you don't think he cares deeply about service, and if you don't think he's someone who does most of what he does without any need, desire, or intention of getting publicity, if you don't think those things about him, you're not doing your homework, because he's all of those things. He's a big-hearted individual. Is he a fiscal conservative? Yeah. One of the reasons I'm a fiscal conservative is because I want the value of everything people own to be higher, not lower. When you're not a fiscal conservative, when you dilute the dollar and you create too much debt, you are writing down the assets of everyone in this country. Everything you own is written down, whether it's in cash or property. And so I'm not into impoverishing people, okay? I'm into empowering people. Fiscal conservatism is the best way to make our country prosperous.
Hey, so brass tacks, just details kind of stuff. When do you get started? What's the deal? People are asking and wondering about your future here on Real Talk. You and I obviously have future conversations to have. We'll let the audience know about all those kind of details to come. I'm already looking forward to a Real Talk roundtable of senators. It'll be you, Paula Simons, and we'll pick a third. I wish it could be Tommy Banks. May he rest in peace. But we'll find a worthy third to hang out with the two of you. But when do you all get started, and what do you have to do before then?
I will be in my first sitting when I'll be sworn in, and that's on September 17th. So that's approximately 4 weeks from now. And, when we talk about specifics about the Senate, I'll be much more equipped to talk about that in the coming days and weeks after that. And that's why some people feel I'm reluctant. It's not about hiding things. I just don't have enough knowledge to speak about it. And, my father and my grandmother and others over the years have always told me that people who speak sometimes will say things that offend people. But as long as you're speaking from knowledge, keep speaking. But if you're speaking about something without knowledge, shut the bleep up.
Don't ever change, hey? Promise us you won't ever change.
I couldn't, Ryan, I couldn't change if I tried. I'm a spontaneous person, and that too also, I guess, gets me into a little bit of trouble. But I think people who know me, people like you and people who listen to this show regularly and others across the country because of all the different shows I've done, they know that when I'm speaking spontaneously from the heart, and I speak the language that Canadians speak. You don't hear me doing all that, whatever you want to call it, wokey, politically correct, cumbersome, academic stuff. I've never spoken that way. I don't intend to speak that way. And I don't intend, when I'm actually working in the Senate and speaking about bills, I don't intend to phony it up. If I do something like that, I know that you'll call me out, and you'll call me out publicly.
We will call you out publicly in love. All right. We will do it out of love for our great nation. I want to give a shout out to Sharon, who's joining us, Sharon Morin, in our live chat. Wonderful friend of the show. Sharon's mom was a senator, by the way, if I remember correctly. She says, Jasper, when you're putting that round table together, don't forget Senator Patty Laboucaine-Benson, also from Alberta. Senator Laboucaine-Benson was on the show, actually, a while. What was it, maybe a year and a half ago or so. She published a graphic novel called The Outside Circle, published by the House of Anansi Press, which is like a super cool literary production with the art by Kelly Mellings. And you can learn more by Googling The Outside Circle. That's written by Canadian Senator Patty Laboucaine-Benson. Sharon, appreciate the shout out there. Chuck, I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot with like specific legislation and stuff like that. And I know you've obviously got some leveling up to do here. You're going to have to school yourself pretty quick. Kenzie's in our chat wondering what your thoughts are on Bill C-63. That's the Online Harms Act. Have you like gotten enough into the details and the nitty gritty on some of this stuff that you're going to be looking at, or are you going to be basically like hitting the books for the next few weeks?
No, I'm just going to follow Grandma Elizabeth's rule and shut up about things I don't know enough about.
That's the answer. There you go. And right now,
that's the honest answer I can give you.
It's probably the correct answer at this moment. Well, listen, man, we were blown away Saturday morning to see the announcement. God's honest truth, you didn't say a single word to me. I had absolutely no idea. I'm doing the math in reverse, and you have done an appearance on Real Talk since speaking with the Prime Minister and finding out, and you kept it under your lid, didn't you? You did.
I follow the laws of the land, and I follow the rules, and without once again getting into the weeds of all this, it was stressed to me that what was happening here had to be done with confidentiality, and I must admit I don't have the attention span to read through all of the reasons for that, but the Privy Council office. So that's representing the government of Canada. It's not representing the Prime Minister, it's representing the government of Canada, told me that it was absolutely important that I share this with no one. So I'll be happy to apologize to you and so many of my friends and acquaintances who didn't have me disclose. But when I'm told by the government of Canada that you're not allowed to share, I took that pretty seriously.
Well, we're proud of you, pal. We're proud to call you a friend and a colleague. It's not every day somebody that you work with every single week is appointed to the Senate of Canada. And so we'll celebrate along with you. Look forward to seeing you in person. And, of course, looking forward to seeing the good work that you will do in the Red Chamber. I was going to go back to the 2013 tweets, but it just didn't feel appropriate, Chuck. It just didn't feel appropriate.
Listen,
no little rabbit punch on the way out.
No, that's fine. Listen, I appreciate the fact that we've got such a strong relationship and respect each other so much that we do not hide the truth. You threw all the truth at me, and I did whatever I could to respond. Some people will be happy with the responses. Some people will have their mind made up that I'm all those things that Scott said I was. And God bless all of you. God bless Canada. And I can't thank Albertans enough for all the support they've given me over the years. Yes, I'll be representing Manitoba, but I'll be working for the interests of Canada. And without the incredible support I've had from Alberta over the years, there's just no way that any of this would have happened.
All right, buddy. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
You got it. Charles Adler, presented on Real Talk by Tice Automotive Consulting. As of the 17th of September, when he swears in, Senator Charles Adler.
Yeah, I suspect we won't see any $22 orange juices on his tabs, but maybe some chocolate milk.
See, people when they talk about Bev Oda's orange juice, it keeps getting more and more expensive. I think it was $16, but I see people but with inflation, people are adjusting it for inflation. Sylvia says anybody considered for appointments has to keep mum about it for sure. She says even if you nominate somebody for Order of Canada, for example, you're not supposed to speak publicly about it before the announcement. I can tell you, even at like way lower levels, even things like when people are nominated for like business awards or the top 40 under 40 or anything like that.
Yeah, you got to be quiet.
It comes with a caveat. It's like if this goes public, you don't get it.
Yeah.
You're out.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, but it was a text, Zane Velge of The Strategist. I wake up Saturday morning. It was like, I don't know, 7:30, 8 o'clock, something like that.
Sure.
And I see a text from Zane that, when someone sends a text and then they're sending like the second part of the text, you see like the 3 dots.
The bubble.
And it just says, wow. And then I'm like, and then the dots. And I'm like, what's wow at 7:30 in the morning? Charles Adler appointed to the Senate. I went, what? Oh my gosh.
Well, if you can't stay mum on something for a week, I don't know if you should be in the Senate.
I don't know if you should be there. Yeah, no kidding. I like this. A Green Tomato in the chat says, love you, Charles. Very exciting for Canada. You're going to do great. Off to the races. That from A Green Tomato. See some people. I mean, obviously the chat's all over the place today. Some of you agree with Charles' critics. You think he's a hypocrite for criticizing the Senate 11 years ago and then being appointed to the Senate now. Some of you believe, as do I, that he'll be an incredible addition to the Senate. I do think I wanted to touch on something, and I'm not speaking for Charles here. Let me just speak generally. There's a lot of people here that are saying, oh, so Charles just admitted when we were talking about, him sort of evolving over the years, his perspective. Like I hope many of you have, like I certainly have, like most people have. Like I hope we feel differently. I guess depending on where your starting point was, but on things like protecting the environment or understanding climate change or based on your upbringing. Maybe you've become enlightened on things like marriage equality or women's health rights and access to them. There's a whole bunch of areas. Like there's a million areas where people can evolve their thoughts. You may get the tiny little sense that maybe I'm even speaking to my own personal experience a bit. But I see people in the chat saying that, oh, Charles has just acknowledged that he'd say anything for a buck, that he's a corporate sellout, that he would do anything for a dime. Just a couple of thoughts on that. Number one, your job is your job. And like if your job is to produce enough widgets on an assembly line to fill a box, to fill a pallet, to get the shipment out to Denmark or wherever they're going to, and every single day you better deliver because that's your job. That's your job. And if your job as a talk radio host is to touch on the issues of the day, but most importantly, build audience and sell advertising, then that is your job. Now, because you're paid to represent or produce compelling and controversial opinions to hook people and keep them there, does not mean that you are disingenuous per se. But it does mean that the expectation is that you will put it out there. At risk of public shame, embarrassment, ridicule, getting canceled. It all comes with the territory because, like Chuck said in the first 5 minutes of our talk today, the talk show that's guaranteed to fail is the boring one. And so the job is to never be boring. But that also doesn't mean that a talk show host, like any other citizen on planet Earth, is not entitled to or even expected to change their mind on things over the years. Now, sometimes it gets a little awkward. This is one of the most awkward and, quite frankly, most entertaining, because you've got a guy that says he would abolish the Senate if he could. He says the Senate is done. He's essentially lost faith in it in 2013, and 11 years later, he's getting set to walk in the door, to be a participant in the process. But I actually think that's kind of beautiful. I actually think it's really beautiful, because you've got somebody walking into that place that did not aspire to be there from their early adult years, that did not do everything that they possibly could to ensure a smooth transition into that stage of their career. You've got somebody that's been openly critical of it, and here exclusively, by the way, in this interview on Real Talk, that's calling for the Senate to be completely shaken to its core. I mean, he wants to see senators elected, the guy that was just appointed. So he's bringing a very interesting perspective there, and I feel like he's going to be representing the average person. The average person that when their friends ask them, are you a liberal, a conservative, or an NDP supporter, they might not have the answer, because they feel like they lean a little left on some stuff, they lean a little right on some stuff, and some stuff they're there to be convinced. We've seen that from Chuck week after week after week on this show. We've even seen him do about faces on this show. We've seen him plant his flag on an issue.
180s,
I think of Jasprat Singh Sidhu, the truck driver that caused the Humboldt crash. I remember Chuck's comments on that he believes that he should be deported. Actually, stronger language than that. I think he said, send him the hell home. And what did he say the very next week when he came on? And he requested to us ahead of time. He said, I want to lead with this. He wanted to address it. He had thought about it. He had heard from some of you, and he'd changed his mind. And I just think that that's a positive character quality. I mean, where are we as a society? Where are we as a group of people if we're going to just crack on folks for coming to a different perspective after considering all of the evidence? We're not talking about somebody that said that the Senate should be abolished and it's a chamber of, what was it, Johnny? The third tweet that he put out there? It was the chamber of drunken second. What was the? We looked at 3 of them today, and I know that there's more. He said it's not a chamber of sober second thought, it's a chamber of drunken second chances. I mean, had he said that like on the Thursday and then been appointed on the Saturday, maybe. 2013 feels like an eternity ago, though. And I don't need to get Chuck off the hook here. I'm just saying, I've changed my mind on a lot of things, in particular over the course of more than a decade, and I don't think that it's that outrageous that somebody else would as well. I am expecting this week's edition of The Flamethrower, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, to have some Adler-related content. I want to let you know, if you have a fiery hot take on this or anything else, you can send us an email to talk@ryanjespersen.com. Make sure you put Flamethrower in the subject line so we know to look for it, and you could hear your email read on the Friday episode of Real Talk. Coming up in just 1 second, we have a Paris Olympics-inspired edition of Positive Reflections. I love this, from Real Talker Ingrid, who sent us an email as soon as she was back from France. But first, I want to remind you that California Closets is ready to host you for a free consultation. If your family is looking to install a custom closet or a storage solution, this could be anywhere in your home, from the laundry room, the guest bedroom, the second office, the entertainment room, the living room, whatever your family calls it. Heck, even your garage could benefit from California Closet's team of designers and their installers, that expert touch. They can create custom solutions designed to fit your space and your budget. You can learn more about the different levels of installs that they design by visiting their website, californiaclosets.ca. And our friends at Complete Care Restoration reminding you that they're ready to respond 24/7 should, heaven forbid, disaster strike in your neck of the woods. They've got team members working in Jasper right now. They've got team members working in communities that were impacted by wildfires in 2023, that record-setting season, plus floods. They're helping people with those home reno projects gone sideways with black mold, or maybe the discovery of asbestos. You don't want to mess around with this stuff yourself. They've got more than 25 years of experience restoring properties, rebuilding peace of mind. You can find them online and request emergency response by visiting CompleteCareRestoration.ca. This is going to be a big week for us, and I want to let people know about some of the stuff that we're talking about coming up. We had a strong audience response. I replied to this. I spoke to this late last week following our conversation on vaccine injuries and some of the myths that Professor Tim Caulfield was looking to bust. But here's the deal. A lot of you wrote in and told us that you felt like you were being ignored. You felt like you were being disrespected based on your or your family's experience. We're going to take a look at a class action lawsuit this week that's suing the federal government, that's suing the provincial government, the government in our home province of Alberta, related to vaccine injuries. We're also going to talk to a young surgical professional, just 24 years of age, that's doing remarkable things to address the problem of wait times for surgery in the province of Alberta and some of those other healthcare woes that we've been talking about. So some great follow-up on that story. Plus, there's a good chance we're going to be talking about the Canadian energy landscape too. It's never a slow week on Real Talk, regardless of the fact that we're in the month of August. You can also send us your feedback if there's a story that you're following in the news. We'll talk about Kamala Harris tomorrow. Some interesting comments from her over the weekend as that presidential race continues to heat up. The polling is absolutely fascinating on this one. But one of the ways that we hear from you most frequently, and we love this, is a weekly tradition, the first episode of every week, presented by our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy. We focus on the positives, the silver linings. We focus on, a lot of times, the stories outside of the news cycle that can restore our faith in humanity. It's Positive Reflections, presented by Kuby Renewable Energy. And we loved this email that we got from Ingrid, who listens to Real Talk out of Calgary. She says, I really enjoyed your thoughts and your shows on the Paris Olympic Games over the past little while. And like you, I was super excited about witnessing the Olympics. She says, I've been glued to the TV every 4 years, so excited to watch sports I normally never do, and to cheer on athletes from around the world. But this year I decided to go and watch the Olympics in Paris in person. With a French mother, we had a place to stay in Paris, so why wouldn't we? As our flights approached the games open, I felt slightly hesitant. With everything going on in the world, was this the right thing to do? I couldn't help but think about the amount of money spent to host the Olympics. Surely we could use that better elsewhere, but I got to admit, as soon as I landed in Paris, all of that evaporated. Even at the airport, everybody was smiling. We could feel the energy. I went to school in Paris, says Ingrid, and I know the city well, but this was a different city that greeted us. There was a buzz in the air, and everybody was in a good mood. She says, we arrived with suitcases full of red and white clothing, Canada flags carefully rolled up, ready to wave over our heads. We were greeted by metro workers, volunteers with Hello Canada, Welcome Canada, people with big smiles. It made me very proud to be a Canadian. She says, I came home with numerous positive reflections. She says, no, there was one afternoon at beach volleyball that will always stay with me, a moment in time where all felt good, surrounded by sports, surrounded by fans from around the world. And I was so lucky to see the Canadian pair, Melissa Humana Paris and Brandy Wilkerson, play in those quarterfinals. On my right side, a Dutch family. On my left, a family from Sri Lanka. No, none of them had watched beach volleyball before, and when I told them one of the players was the niece of a good friend of mine, they were even more excited. Every time Canadians would score a point, the neighbors in our seats would cheer, Go Canada. I was astounded by French spectators that day. I don't know if it was my Canadian flag or how likable our athletes are, but I was surrounded by Europeans chanting Canada, Canada in their lilting accents. Even the French boys behind me in their high squeaky voices chanting my country's name with their proper French pronunciation. She says, in these little moments of sport and humanity, I really felt like I was surrounded by camaraderie, love, good wishes. We had come from all parts of the world, all walks of life, to sit under that warm French sun, to cheer, to laugh, to chant together, and for a moment, all of that division in the world briefly disappeared. I really was on an Olympic high. She says, no, I know that there are Olympic haters out there. The costs are ridiculous, but I can't think of anything else that brings the world together like this. I came home thinking about how good sport, even though it's competition, brings citizens of the world together, and how our country is so well respected. Writes Ingrid. So merci, Paris. Thank you. You put on a world-class show. From the unique opening ceremony to the venues set in historical parts of the city to the way that your citizens and volunteers greeted all of us, you did a superb job, and it was amazing coming home feeling loved and positive about the world, even if only for a moment. That from Ingrid. Ingrid, thank you so much for sharing your positive reflections with us. If you, like Ingrid, experienced something that had a real impact on your perspective, we'd love to hear about it. To talk@ryanjespersen.com. It's presented proudly every week by our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy. Thanks for making this episode of Real Talk part of your day. Thanks for sharing it with folks you know might be interested, and thanks for subscribing to us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena